Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Middle East Security Initiative, is also a former Deputy Assistant Secretary at the US Department of Homeland Security. Good to have you back with us, Thomas. Antony Blinken's visit comes at a time when Saudi Arabia really is increasingly inserting itself as a power broker in the region. Is Riyadh a threat to Washington's influence in the Middle East?
No, of course not. In fact, the countries have a long history of close partnership and working together on security and economic issues. It is true that relations have been a bit strained in the recent months and several years. The people in Washington have still not entirely forgotten the death of a Washington-based journalist in Turkey at the hands of what eventually Saudi Arabia admitted were rogue operatives. This still has not been forgotten. At the same time, in Saudi Arabia, they are concerned about the extent of U.S. commitment to the Middle East and point to various withdrawals and redeployments of U.S. military assets. But in many ways, the countries will end up working together. The certain regional threats from countries that have threatened both U.S. and Saudi interests. There are a host of economic issues to be worked out that will affect the future of oil prices and how food will get from bread baskets in Ukraine to hungry mouths in the Middle East. These are all issues that both Saudi and U.S. officials are eager to talk to each other about. As you say, though, the possibility of normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia is certainly one of the most important, because it would be truly historic if this happens.
Yes, tell us more about that, because Blinken did say that the normalization of ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia would be a topic of conversation during his trip. Why is that important for the United States?
Well, recently the Saudis put out the word that they were interested in a very close security relationship, perhaps even closer than Washington was comfortable with, and that this would be one of the prices for normalization. But it's quite interesting that the kingdom has gone through a period recently of making up with rivals throughout the region. The rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, the effort to try to bring Assad of Syria back into the Arab League, which is certainly something the Saudis have two minds about. But all of these efforts really are leading up to the big normalization, the one that would occur between Riyadh and Jerusalem. If this happens, it will recast the politics of the Middle East. And I have no doubt that the Saudis want to make sure that their security footing is absolutely rock solid before they take such a move.
Now, in April, we saw rivals Iran and Saudi Arabia formally restoring diplomatic ties at a meeting in Beijing, something that was unthinkable until now. China seems to have had a hand in this, not Washington. What's the US view on this, given that Iran is seen as one of Israel's and the US's biggest threats?
It was rather natural for China to be brokering such a deal, because it was one of only about three countries that have close ties with both Riyadh and Tehran. And so to that extent, Washington was pleased, because anything that reduces the likelihood of war in the Middle East is something that Washington should be happy to see. That said, however, Iran has still not stopped its aggressive moves. Recently, the IRGC Navy harassed U.S. and other vessels exercising their rights under international law in the Persian Gulf. And what we have not yet seen is any sign that this diplomatic rapprochement will lead to an easing of security tensions. So it seems mostly symbolic for now. But clearly the United States is wanting to show that it is a reliable security partner in the Gulf. And Saudi Arabia wants to show the United States that it is willing to work constructively with Washington on issues of mutual importance.
Okay, Thomas, Warrick, we will have to leave it there, but great to get your analysis as always. Thank you for joining us.